This is the Fix Your Sciatica podcast. Autoimmune disorders, autoimmune diseases, what are they? What is the role when it comes to dealing with pain such as sciatica? About a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to interview a rheumatologist, and we talked a little bit more about autoimmune disorders, specifically in the world of rheumatology. But there is a whole world in which our immune system will actually be having an impact on how we feel. And being that this podcast is not just only education, but it's also a lot about action. Today, I have Robin Engelson, who is an autoimmune disorder disease coach who helps people really overcome a lot of those challenges. And today, we're going to talk a little bit more about what autoimmune diseases and disorders are, the role in pain management, specifically with sciatica, and also some action steps for you to look out for when, if you're dealing with an autoimmune issue. So, Robin, thank you so much for being on today's episode.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to be able to share my expertise and help your listeners.
Yeah, I mean, the pleasure is all mine. So for the listeners who may not have heard of you so far, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you into the world of autoimmune diseases?
Absolutely. So my name again is Robin Engelson. I am the founder of Impact You, and I have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, which Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease, and hypothyroidism is part of that. And so I was diagnosed, went in for blood work for something, came out with an autoimmune disease, which you can imagine is life-changing, not life-threatening. And so I was on a mission to find the solution to feel better and overcome my autoimmunity. And what I've done is do that, find the solution, which we'll share in just a bit. And I've used that to help hundreds of moms across the country and internationally change their mindset as a model of positive change, increase energy, lose weight, and truly just feel energized all day and start living instead of existing. And by doing that, I've empowered many moms and people to just really know that you're going to be okay and give hope to those that have autoimmunity.
I love it. And so listeners out there, again, this podcast, we're here to educate you, but there's so much information that's already out there. And so what you're going to get the most value from is the action steps that you're going to be taking upon receiving the education that we're sharing with you today. There, in the world of autoimmune diseases, or even just like in the realm of health and wellness, there is this, we'll have like specific roles. We have healthcare professionals and then we have coaches. I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding or misinformation about the differences between health coaches and healthcare practitioners or coaches in general. So could you tell us a little bit more about from your perspective, what are the differences between a coach and say like a healthcare professional?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are very distinct differences. So a healthcare professional is going to look at your blood work results and base your plan and how they're going to help you on your blood work. But the problem with that is that your blood work could be fine and you could still feel like crap when you have autoimmunity. And that is exactly what happened to me and most of the moms that I do help. And you're going to be treated with medication. On the other side is the coach. And so the coach really looks at the root cause and the environmental factors that are influencing and causing the autoimmunity, causing the pain, causing the reaction in your body, so they can come up with a solution for you that does involve, working with the health provider for the medication, but also the supplementation. What are you deficient in, right? Your mindset. You have to be able to change your mindset in order to change your life, and using how you deal with stress. Like, what are the stressors in your life and how do you become the calm in the storm? So I like to share that coaches are like your whole life experience, whereas health professionals and providers strictly look at your blood results and make decisions based on that.
Right on. I appreciate you sharing the differences between the two. It seems as if, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is really, it's more of a symbiotic relationship. You're part of the team that actually helps people get better, where say the medical professional will be like, okay, here's the problem. You need to do X, Y, and Z. But as a coach, you actually say, all right, well, this needs to get done, but this is how we're going to do it. We're going to make it easier, digestible, and ultimately actionable. I can't tell you how many times people I know, and also the clients that I've worked with, when they're going in and seeing their doctor and they're saying, okay, you have this problem. And I think it's important that the healthcare professionals out there are very important, because it allows us to, well, one, there's going to be a silo for each and individual professional, and the information that we receive from our healthcare professionals, we can either take up the responsibility ourselves to try and make these changes, or we can get the help from a coach such as yourself, being able to say, all right, what's the easiest way or the most actionable way to make these changes? Does that sound about right?
Spot on. And yes, you do need to work in conjunction with your healthcare provider and a coach like myself, because you need the medication when your body isn't producing certain hormones or certain whatever your autoimmunity diagnosis is. However, if your health professional is saying, you need to change your nutrition, what do you do with that? How do you do it? They're not trained in that. As a coach, I'm trained in that as a certified nutrition coach, to help you create a 7-day meal plan and alter and help your nutrition so it fuels your body for your autoimmunity, so you can feel better in conjunction with the medication that you need from your healthcare professional. So spot on.
Love it. And so let's take a deep dive in talking about autoimmune disorders, right? I think, with the changing times, I've come across autoimmune disorders, autoimmune diseases, autoimmune issues. So kind of in this whole blanket aspect, tell us a little bit more about autoimmune challenges, disorders, diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, an autoimmune disease, autoimmune issues, whatever you want to call it, I look at it as the silent disease, because it's not visible, right? It's something that's happening inside your body internally, and you don't get it unless you get it. And what an autoimmune disease is where your body is mistakenly attacking a healthy part of your body. So then it becomes deficient, and you can't produce or function what that organ or part of your body is supposed to do. For example, your thyroid, I can speak directly to that because I have Hashimoto's. My thyroid doesn't function like someone who doesn't have it. It may look the same, but it doesn't produce certain functions of the thyroid. And so what that means is that if I did not find the solution, and I'm just starting off and I got diagnosed, I would be exhausted all the time. I'd have chronic fatigue. My hair would be falling out. My nails would be brittle. I'd be sensitive to cold and heat. My mood swings and flashes would be off the charts. My hormonals would be completely unbalanced. So, it really is all of those combined as far as what it is, the definition of an autoimmune disease and autoimmune issues. And, a lot of times they're not diagnosed right away. They're very well mistaken for other things, as I'm sure Dr. Mack, you can talk to that as well. But, they're very common across all autoimmunity. And when you have one, you typically have another, if not three.
Yeah. And I think you bring up something very interesting or very important, is that it's invisible. You don't have, it's not something that it's invisible, but you would be able to detect it probably through some sort of blood test or some sort of diagnostic test. Very similar to something like pain. When you're experiencing pain itself is in fact an experience. Yes, there can be some damage, but when you are in the chronic stage of pain where the majority of the healing needs to be done, but you're still experiencing this sensation, it's hard for us to really pinpoint what that is. And so that's why it's so important with something like an autoimmune disorder that you have the various different lab tests to help you diagnose it. But then we'll go into a little bit more, because what Robin does is those things that are even more invisible to be able to help facilitate behavior change. But it is important for us to take a step back and say, what are we experiencing? And then go on and address it from an action step standpoint. So for the listeners out there who aren't dealing with autoimmune disorders or are dealing with something and they're like, I don't know what I should be doing, can you tell us a little bit more about what your journey was like when you came across or found out that you were that you had Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism.
Absolutely. And, I love sharing this because, as I mentioned previously, I got diagnosed accidentally. I didn't have symptoms, so I thought, right? Because every time I went to the doctor, it was, they would give me medication for something else. They never did the true blood test that I needed. So I was actually trying to get pregnant with my second child, and I couldn't get pregnant, which is very unusual. You think, right? You already have a child. And I went in for blood work, and I came through a specialist. Infertility specialist, and I came out with a diagnosis of Hashimoto's because my thyroid antibodies were off the charts. So my first indicator is to go to a provider that tests for your thyroid levels, but specifically your antibodies and your T3 and T4. Most providers only do T3, T4, but you need all three, T3, T4, and antibodies in order to detect if you have Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, or other related autoimmune diseases. And that might sound like Greek to you because it still sounds like Greek to me, even though I understand it. But just know that a regular primary care doctor may not be testing for this, and you may be having symptoms internally or not aware of it. So once I got diagnosed, it took me multiple providers, endocrinologists, which is the thyroid doctor on the medical provider side, to figure out what was happening and how to help me, because I ended up being allergic to the typical medication that they subscribe. And I got sicker and sicker after being diagnosed. Symptoms started coming up after I got diagnosed because I was having an allergic reaction directly to the medication. And so that's where, a health coach comes in, because they can help you with that root cause of what's happening in your body and the toxicity that it's having, in conjunction with what your blood results are saying for the autoimmunity with your healthcare provider. And once you get that in sync and you're on the right medication and you have the right supplementation and you're working with your healthcare provider in conjunction with your health coach, then it's a win-win. And then you start to feel better and you're starting to get on the healing path and the healing journey to start living instead of existing.
This episode is brought to you by the Sciatica Protocol. Experience pain relief directly through your phone, anytime, anywhere. Interested in learning more? Check us out at ifixyoursciatica.com/the-sciatica-protocol. I think that's beautiful. It's important, listeners, for you to know that it's not my job to tell you whether or not you should be taking your medicine. That's outside of my knowledge and skill set. And I think what Robin did a great job was saying, working in conjunction with these other healthcare professionals. I think a lot of people are very averse to saying, I don't want to take medications. I don't want to, talk to my doctor. It's often they're driven by big pharma, but it's the physicians that are out there with their knowledge and with their license. They can schedule these blood tests, these screens, these tools that give us an even deeper look that physical therapists, coaches, we can't necessarily look at and interpret because we haven't received the training. And so you have these physicians, there's a huge place for them. And maybe you have had a poor experience with with any professional in the past, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of those people in that specific profession carry the same knowledge or motivation. So not everyone is created equal, but there's a huge place for us to be able to say, are these things that we don't necessarily detect, can they be found in other various different tests? And that's where the true, one of the big valuable pieces of a physician. And so I really appreciate that, Robin. So let's talk a little bit more about the autoimmunity, right? It's this concept of the self-immune system is kind of attacking lack of a better word, attacking various different parts of your body, which results in the fact that you might be deficient in a specific hormone or your body does various different things. That sounds quite similar to, say, someone who's dealing with, say, chronic inflammation in the body. The body's going through a whole bunch of stuff. With your experience, and I know that you were saying with Hashimoto's, you have the fatigue, hair loss, a lot of these symptoms that go along with it, saying that your body's deficient in these various different hormones. Tell us a little bit more about what your experience is like seeing people who had, say, autoimmune issues, but playing when it comes to dealing with pain.
It absolutely goes together, right? I mean, I have had chronic back pain, chronic sciatica, chronic immune issues, which are allergies and migraines, gut issues. It's all related to autoimmunity. A lot of times people get treated for chronic pain when they, in fact, also have an autoimmune disease. And again, getting back to the root cause, it's not treated. But the way that I, in my experience, dealt with this is that I literally looked at the root cause. What am I doing? What's my environment? How can I make this better? Right. And so it comes down to nutrition, fitness, mindset, and accountability, which are the 4 pillars of my program and how I healed myself to become an autoimmune overcomer. And so when you look at the nutrition part of it, what are you fueling your body? How often are you eating? What are you eating? Inflammation is in everybody, right? But when you have autoimmunity, it shows itself a lot more. And a lot of the foods that we eat and our body, it can make it worse, right? And we might not even know it. And that's where the coach comes in versus the healthcare provider, right? Because the coach knows exactly how to create a 7-day meal plan for you that's going to help you lower immunity and reduce inflammation based on the foods that you eat. And then with the mindset, you got to be able, this is the key thing. This was my hardest work. I worked on this like no one's business, being able to change your mindset, to change your life as a model of positive change, being the calm in the storm, reducing your stress, knowing when you're about to snap, but having a system and a mechanism, something that you can do in your brain to reverse that instantly, being proactive instead of reactive, because inflammation flares when your stress is high. And what happens is then your cortisol is high, and that is a domino effect on your thyroid and other autoimmune issues that you may have or diseases that you're dealing with. So it's really learning how to manage your mindset and understand what that means and how you can help yourself, because making yourself a priority is not selfish, it's necessary. No one's going to do it for you. So again, that's nutrition, mindset, fitness. With autoimmunity, we have to keep our bones strong and be able to manage that. So we want to be able to work out, 3 to 4 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything intense, but weightlifting is what you need to do. So I started going from cardio only to weightlifting and cardio, because we got to get our muscles and bones strong. And that also helps change your mindset. So it's all related. And then finding the accountability person, whether that's your coach, whether that's a friend, a mentor. But, as a coach, that's exactly what I do for you. I stand for you. I keep you accountable, because sometimes, doing it yourself, it's just not possible. It's not possible long term, because you need that accountability. You need someone to be able to tell you, like, it's okay when you're having a hard day. Like, it's okay, right? Tomorrow we get to be 1% better to help ourselves and be better people. So again, it's nutrition, fitness, mindset, and accountability.
Really, really helpful. One thing that you brought up early on in this was it's the relationship of pain and the presence of the autoimmune disorder, and oftentimes the pain that you were going through, it was combined with a couple other symptoms that you might have had. And what's really interesting is that whenever I start working with a client, one of the biggest things that I will ask them first before I do anything else is, number one, we have to clear red flags. We have to be able to say, are any of these things that you're going through caused by something that is outside the scope of what I can provide? And that's anything. We need to rule out cancers. We need to rule out fractures. We need to rule out anything else that we can't do. But then also, in addition to that, another question that I'll often ask people is, in addition to the pain that you're experiencing, is there anything else out of the normal that you are experiencing? Because it gives us an opportunity to figure out, is the pain that you're experiencing associated with another condition that either is diagnosed or not diagnosed, and being able to look at it as a whole person. And I also really appreciate you said that, those 4 pillars are very, very important. There's a huge benefit to strength training. Nutrition, mindset, and accountability, which is what you were talking about. And I actually was just recently working with another patient who had sciatica, and initially when they were diagnosed with sciatica, their doctor told them that they shouldn't be lifting any weights. And I was seeing this person probably for about 2 or 3 weeks, and the pain has gone down. And they said, can I go back into lifting weights? And I said, absolutely. But tell me a little bit more about what lifting weights meant to you. And they were telling me that they were going to the gym, doing something like a bench press and doing some bicep curls. And what's really interesting is that when you're doing an exercise like bench press, you're laying down, you're not really loading your spine. So it made me really start to think about, well, why did this doctor tell them that they shouldn't be weightlifting, where something like a bench press was actually probably pretty safe because they were laying down, they weren't moving, they weren't loading up their spine. And ultimately, this is where another big value that a coach can add is that, truth be told, doctors are there to make sure that whatever problems are looked at can be addressed, but they don't necessarily have the time to go through every single parameter of your life, which would allow you to make those specific changes. Because if they had a little bit more time, they could have said, hey, patient, I know that you have sciatica pain. I know that you love exercising. So you can do stuff like bench press. You can do stuff like cable rows. You can do any weightlifting exercise that doesn't load your spine. But ultimately, when we're strapped by time, we don't have the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth. And so when you are working with someone one-to-one and they have the time and bandwidth to be able to look into your life, we can say, these are how you can implement changes into your life, which would include what you eat, kind of like what Robin was saying, how to move, your mindset, because ultimately you're seeing your medical professionals probably once every couple of months. For physical therapy, you're probably seeing a physical therapist 2 or 3 times a week, but even so, those hour-long sessions are only 4% of a 24-hour day. And so what that means is that there's so many other different factors. And it is important to either work with a coach or someone who's actually going to be able to say, how are you feeling on a daily basis, or giving you strategies that you can implement on a regular basis, because nothing's going to get fixed overnight. It's going to be a large part of daily small actionable steps that is going to allow you to achieve that result that you want. And oftentimes, aside from the traumas that we experience, a lot of the injuries and a lot of aches and pains that we develop usually happen over time. And so, Robin, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing your experience and being able to overcome that. And I think it's extremely important for people to know that it's a stepwise fashion. It's also important for us to be able to address small action steps. And so when it comes to action, right? And this, I think what's really cool about dealing with autoimmune issues such as yourself is that you are providing actionable steps, which allows people to achieve their highest level of health. And with that, it can be applied to people with autoimmune disorders, but also can be applied to healthy human beings as well, who aren't dealing with it, but are dealing with pain as well. So when it comes to action, right, let's talk about some things that people can really take into account upon leaving this episode. So then that way they can just continue to make themselves feel better.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. I always say it's the daily actions that get us to the bigger goal. And it's not the destination, it's the journey that gets us to the destination. Because you can be in pain, but as long as you're taking those steps every day to be 1% better, you're going to find some relief. So action steps to feeling better and finding a solution. First is make sure you have a good health professional that's doing the blood work and getting you the tests that you need and want based on your symptoms. And if they're not, find someone else. Don't stick around with them. Second is find a health coach that works in conjunction with your health provider so they can look at the root cause and really understand what's going on with you and how they can impact you. And number 3 is to understand that you're not alone and you're going to be okay. Right? Other people have been in your situation and position, even though you may think you're the only one in the world going through this right now. And by taking these actionable steps of finding the healthcare provider, finding the coach, knowing that it's going to be okay, you will be able to impact you with your nutrition, fitness, mindset, and accountability and change your life so you are starting to live instead of exist.
Living instead of existing. I love it. So for the listeners out there, who have gotten a ton of value from what we've shared today, and they want to get in touch. They want to learn a little bit more about what you do. They have some questions. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I love questions. I love it. So please bring it on. I'm an open book. You can reach me all over social media platforms at Robin Engelson. I'll spell that. It's ROBYN, last name ENGELSON, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I am so excited to get your questions and impact you.
Beautiful. Listeners out there, if you did not get a chance to write that down, I'm actually going to be putting some of those links into the show notes today. So yeah, Robin, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you're really busy, but you have a lot of really great information. You're helping a ton of people. And so thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Mack, for allowing me to be on here as your guest today on your podcast and share some hope and insight with your listeners.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you got some help from today's podcast. And for more info, check us out at ifixyoursciatica.com. Have a fantastic and pain-free day. No patient-therapist relationship is formed by listening to this podcast. We are not providing medical advice, and all information should be confirmed by a medical provider.